Hi, I'm Ron Duska, the Charles Lamont Post Chair of Ethics and the Professions at the American College and the Director of the Center for Ethics and Financial Services at the college. And I'm here with Phil Cubeta, the Sallie B and William B. Wallace Chair in Philanthropy at the college. And we have been talking about King Lear, among other things, and how to fairly distribute one's one's wealth and legacy and that sort of stuff. And we wanted to continue the conversation and pick up where we left off. So, Phil, I'm reminded of someone who told me, basically it was Jim Mitchell, who was head of IDS, and he said he always wanted to ask his compliance people not what can he do, but he wanted to tell them this is what needs to be done. Tell me how I can do it. Do you have any ideas for new modes of operation for it?
I think the attorney saying he can't ask those questions, she can't ask, is an alibi. I think it's plain and simply an alibi. And the very best attorneys, very best say, I won't even tell you what they say when they hear that, but they're embarrassed or ashamed to be associated with the profession. What I would really say to people is, it's not required for you to ask the question, and it's not forbidden. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to have the courage to do it. And I think the reason people hesitate to do it is they don't know how to respond when the client gives you a response. In other words, you ask the question, what kind of person do you want to be? And the person has a successful business. What kind of world? And the person says, well, I've always wanted to be a missionary. I inherited these radio stations. I became a cable entrepreneur. I'm worth millions of dollars, but I always wanted to be a missionary. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? And if you simply ask, in my opinion, if you simply ask the person to continue the story, tell me how that would play out if you could act on that impulse, you will eventually discover there are tremendous planning issues that stand in the way of the achievement of whatever that dream evolves into being. Mm-hmm. Can you afford to do it? Who's going to handle the business? Are you going to sell the business? So the planning issues will arise. You're right back on safe ground soon enough, but you have to be willing to stay with them as they think it through for themselves. And it's mostly a question of asking a question and listening and encouraging them as they think it through for themselves.
Yeah.
But you do that all the time, right? This is what isn't it fair to say this is what the ethics tradition has been since time immemorial?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're the first people to do this.
No. By the way, it's incredibly gratifying in the sense of, it is lots of fun. Why do I do this? Because when you raise these questions, people are hungering to get involved in them. If I do a class and I've got them for at least 30 minutes, I had no other opportunity to do this.
Right.
Given the busy stuff of the day. And I think you need time to sit back and reflect. By the way, I've gotten, that there are no answers in literature. I don't think there are that many answers in philosophy either. I do these things and people say, you've got all these problems, Duska, where's your answer? And I say that. But let me get on to another point that we've talked about. I walked into your office the other day. Someone who runs an insurance company in in Idaho, sent me a little pamphlet from his father. It's Dennis Johnson, I guess. He wouldn't mind me letting out his name. And in the pamphlet, it's a kind of theology of wealth. And he points out rightly that originally there were some prohibitions against insurance because you were supposed to be like the birds in the air and that sort of stuff and not worry about it. But he quotes John Wesley, and that struck me as interesting because a couple of days before I was looking through a passage of Wesley. And Wesley, who is the founder of Methodism, says something to the effect of, earn all you can, right? Use all you can, and give. I don't have that exactly right, but give for yourself. But which comes back to my point. You had talked about the necessity in a whole lot of cases of finding the client where they are, and a good deal of clients have differing religious backgrounds, and that it's really helpful to tap into those. Do I have it right, or am I misrepresenting what you're thinking?
I think it's a very this issue of raising the ultimate questions and seeing how people respond. I think you really can do that, even across traditions. But there does come a point when you ask those questions, they pause, they hesitate, they kind of change roles, they stop being a business person in a secular context. And in response to the question, they will begin to quote from their own sacred text. They'll give you a saying from the Bible. They'll begin to talk about King Lear, whatever it may be, but there's something sacred to them. And if you don't know enough about that tradition to respond sympathetically, if it makes you uncomfortable or you draw a blank and so forth, there comes a point where you begin to feel like, maybe I'm not quite the right person to take this conversation one more step, except on the financial side. And I think what that leads to, if you can see that as an issue, I think what it leads to really is a marketing opportunity when you really come down to it. I think if we go to the organizations that foster values, that really stand for this values conversation, because every religion is founded on people who made it their job to ask these questions. The sacred texts are the asking of those questions, right? Yep. I mean, philosophical texts the same way, literature, the liberal arts. So these organizations are designed to pass on those values and those traditions of asking and answering those questions. That's why they exist for thousands and thousands of years. So to the extent you can go back to the organization that means most to you and work with the people in that organization to convene an event where these questions can be raised among peers, because it's two people doing it in a solitary way gets you so far. But I think a lot of times people prefer to have those questions raised with their peers, people who are equally successful. They're not going to give the personal answer, but you can raise the issue of how much is enough for kids, how much is too much for kids. What would you like to do after you exit from the business? What kind of impact do you want to have above and beyond impact on yourself and your family? What do you want to have an impact on your community? There's something interesting about having that conversation in a group of people who share a common bond on sacred ground they consider sacred outside of an office building. Get them to hash through these issues, and by the time they've done that, they're going to be so churned up. I mean, in sales, we talk about finding points of disturbance. Once they have had this conversation, they're going to realize their documents are entirely at right angles to these questions, because the attorney considered it malpractice to raise them. It's malpractice to raise a question about goals, okay? It can't be. It can't be. So once these goal questions have been raised and answered to some degree, they're going to be motivated to work with you to get the planning done again.
Phil, these are great ideas. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, could you give them your email address?
Yes, it's phil.cubeta, Cubeta, at theamericancollege.edu. Great.
And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future. And for any of you out there who are interested, if you want to look at more interesting stuff, go to the webpage, www.theamericancollege.edu, put in / and ethics, and you'll get to the Center for Ethics.